Hey everyone, welcome to the Insight Cafe. I'm your host, 𝗔𝗂 𝗁𝗲𝗂𝗂, and today, I have my dear friend and colleague, McKelvie, all the way from the US. Ian is the managing partner at Becauz. He is an innovative consultant, master facilitator, and transformative coach with over 30 years of experience in harnessing people's best. He is known for his ability to bring out fresh insights and his uncompromising commitment to what's possible for leaders and their teams. And him and his company have worked with giants such as Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Boeing, Salesforce, and Coca-Cola. So y'all want to pull up a seat and pay attention to what's about to go down. So welcome, Ian.
𝗔𝗂, thanks for having me.
So given your experience and your wisdom, you said something in a different conversation that made my ears perk up. And you said the phrase, high performance corporate athlete. And what I want to do with you on this call is I would love for you to unpack that for me. And because you said athlete, and I was a professional taekwondo athlete for 20 years,
Sure.
And we're always striving to be our best and get our best to perform and put results on the table, right? So in this call, we're going to look at what gets in the way of their performance and how to solve those problems. So any corporate leader or leaders watching this can walk away with at least a pragmatic way of looking at their challenges so they can get more of their best. All right, let's dive in.
Yeah, where do you want to start? Just, all right. And I remember that conversation too. And I use that term because you've always struck me as not only a high performance athlete, but a high performance coach and a high performance human being. And, in that moment, I realized that you and I were, in the same business.
Yeah.
And, I have the privilege of working with these high performance athletes, people that have spent, their tens of thousands of hours perfecting their craft in the corporate world. So leading really large teams, overcoming what look like intractable problems, the running huge organizations across the globe and really operating and being paid to operate at their best and be able to scale tens of thousands of people, be able to grow and scale their businesses no matter what's going on, in circumstances. And meanwhile, their lives and what they do, they're in 8 to 10 hours of meetings a day, high pressure situations. People count on them to be able to generate insights and innovation, or at least be able to hear it from their people. And they go from meeting to meeting. And then around the side of it, they have investor calls, they have conversations with their boards, they have, they've got to travel to various places. And it's one heck of a life. But I assume, like your experience of being an athlete, it's high stress, it's high pressure, the stakes are high, they have limited amounts of time to make a big impact, and then they're continually on the go, redlined at the edge of their capacities, and they're expected to show up at their best. That's what they're paid to do.
Let me reflect that back and why I resonate with everything you just said. So when I was a professional taekwondo athlete and I was competing all around the world and competing at the Thai National Olympics, everything you said related. Because I remember, like, when I was competing at the Thai National Olympics and I was representing a province or a state, it wasn't just 𝗔𝗂 competing. He was representing a whole community of people. And me and this other guy walked on the mat, and somebody was going to win in the next 10 minutes and somebody was going to lose. And it wasn't just, okay, I got up that day and we're going to fight. It was a year's worth of preparation for 10 minutes. And so what I relate to what you were saying is this person's whole life to prepare for this period of time in his life where he is the leader, that he is the CEO. And you know what else I saw, which was really cool, is when we think of professional sports and there's lights and there's camera and there's action and we're seeing them like slam dunk or touchdown, we don't see any of that in the corporate world, but that's the level of intensity that is going on all the time. And there's something you said that resonated with me before we started recording. You said that that's 8 hours a day or more, right? Whereas a basketball game is a couple hours. And sure, they prepare all the day, but like they're on, right, for that period of time. But as a professional corporate athlete, you're on for almost the whole day.
Yes.
I'd love for you to speak to that.
And not only that, the days string together. I don't know anybody that's working in a high performance role inside of a company that's doing 40 hours a week. Most of the people I'm working with are doing 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And when they're, sorry, I'm about to sneeze.
Okay.
When they're not at work,
right,
they're thinking about work. They're looking at what's happening next week, next 90-day cycle if they're a public company, next year, right? They're constantly going outside of the actual time they're in the seat, so to speak. And so there is no let up, right? Yes, they take vacations, but one of the interesting things I work with the clients is just what it actually takes for them to go on vacation and unplug.
Like really unplug, right? Not fake unplug.
Yeah. Not like, oh, I'm going to get up 2 hours early before my family gets up and I'm going to just put in some time. I'm going to make sure I don't get back to 500 emails in my inbox. So I'm going to, right? And one of the core things that I make sure of is that they actually have a free day, which a free day to me is 24 hours. 24 hours where they're not doing any business reading, they're not answering emails, they're not online. They actually give their mind a 24-hour rest. And sometimes that's a huge task to be able to get someone to do when, you know, some of the folks that I work with have two assistants that just manage their calendars.
Yeah.
One that manages their calendar for all of their corporate activities and one that manages their calendar for sort of the rest of their lives. And they don't get a break, right? I've actually worked with, you know, one of the first things we did as a company is we worked with the Seattle Sonics, the NBA team. And there was always training time, golfing time, relaxing
rest time, right?
Rest time, recreation, right? We call it recreation, recreating, you know, the sort of human unit, the being that is paid to perform. And there's seasons, there's games, there's travel, and most of the corporate athletes I'm working with, there is no end of the season, right? If they do their gig really well and they perform and they create results and they create growth and they've got a great culture and they've got all of their people pointed in the same direction, they get to either keep their role, or if there is the sort of the next promotion or the next company, it's they're constantly in motion. And you know, the wear and tear on the machine is pretty extreme.
I can attest to that. It reminds me of a story. I remember I was in Taekwondo training, and this was near towards the end of my career. I remember I pulled my right or left hamstring, and it was like one of those pulls where like you're gonna sit down. So what occurred to me to do was, and without thinking about it, I said, it was a very quick calculation, like, okay, well, you can't use your right leg, so I guess we'll just use the other one then. There was no, we'll sit down, we'll take a break. It was without thinking, like, how do I keep going? And then, oh, like, okay. And then when both legs were gone, Ian, I was like, okay, well, I can still punch. Okay, I guess that's what we're doing for the next hour, because I'll be damned if I sit down. And I imagine, because that was just athlete mentality, like you you show up and
Sure.
whatever needs to be done will be done regardless of damage or things like that. And there was one phrase that I'd love for you to speak to that I loved, and we're going to coin it before we start recording. You said that, so we kind of framed as there are these professional corporate athletes, and you said they're like corporate velociraptors who have to go home to a wife and family and relationship, right? But they're still on. I'd love for you to speak to that too.
Yeah, and like all of us, Nikon, I sometimes think of us like elastic bands.
Yeah.
And so, we're a series of elastic bands. And if we stretch our elastic band too far from center, too far from ground,
right,
like it pulls the whole system off. And most, whenever there's a band that's stretched and really stretched, and we know it's either going to snap back or break, or it's putting stress and tension on another part of our world, our life, our mental, emotional, our physical, our spiritual sort of being. And, it's really tough because they're revving at red line most of the day, and then they've got to, come home. And what's interesting is they have so much rank and so much power in these hierarchical systems they work in, right? Most of it's like having an admiral on deck. They come into a room and the room prickles. They show up on a Zoom call and the Zoom call gets quiet. There's sort of they have so much power and rank. Right? They mention something in an offhand way, and all of a sudden there's a team of people that have spooled it up as an initiative for a program. It's like when they speak, stuff happens. And then they get home and it's a different hierarchical system, and they've got to take out, the rubbish. They've got to, unload the dishwasher. They got to, maybe put the kids to bed, or they've got to, and that whole gearing down process, and the fact that, at home, I remember getting back from a 3-week trip where I'd been to Hong Kong, I had been to Vietnam, and then, I found myself in Tokyo. I was doing a series of programs, and I got home, and I'm working with teams and leaders, and so I'm revving like that. And I got home, and my son was 6 at the time. And I was, in the laundry room, unpacking my bag, and he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I live here. This is my house." And I looked down, and I got a little 6-year-old dude who hasn't seen me in 2 weeks, and I am justifying my existence to him because
in your own house.
I've been transforming the planet by day, and then I got to be dad at night, and it's that whole process. So it's, we've got these high performing, and they're super people. I love the clients I get to work with. They're just amazing, very generous, but their whole life is oriented to their work, and it means they're rubber bands that are stretched, so far, means when that band snaps back or it breaks, it has an impact somewhere else in their life. And I will say almost universally, when I start working with leaders in this high pressure, high stress corporate world, that we think that they're getting all the goodies. Look at the money they're making. Look at the stock options they've got. Look at the cars they drive. Look at the second homes they have. I mean, they have all of the goodies. And so it's really easy to look at them and say, they must just be living in a land of milk and honey. And in a lot of ways they are, but you and I know that's not what really feeds our heart and feeds our soul. And so a lot of them are not having a blast, not having a great life. And with all of their shoulds and expectations of what it was going to look like, you know, like the rest of us, it's super important to make sure we're not only getting our needs met, that we're continuing to nurture, you know, the human unit, the sort of the human experience unit that we all get to travel in. And so they're sort of geared and primed, and in this one realm they're spectacular. But in other realms it doesn't always translate.
I'm sure you can resonate with what I'm about to say. Like, you know, being on stage and you're just the rock star and you're center of attention and everything you say moves 100 people this way or that way. And the moment you step out of that space, you're nobody. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Right. And I imagine I think I'm reflecting that because I imagine that's what you kind of described in its own way. Like, oh, you're this major CEO and what you say is law, and then you go home and you're like you have to put that at the door, otherwise your marriage or relationship will not work. And
Yes.
so this segues into the next part of our conversation is, what gets in the way for people like this at being more of their best? Because that's where your expertise comes in, right? Harnessing people's best. Because I really believe that you can't fix what you can't see. So I'd love for us to point to the invisible things that get in the way of people being at their best, and what are some pragmatic things to do or perspectives that will help people listening address those challenges. So let's just say the first one. It's funny. It's a whole new way of looking at pressure. Like, pressure rolls off our tongue, but from what you just said to me in this first 15 minutes of the call, I have a deeper appreciation of what that pressure might feel like. Because I just realized just now that when I say pressure, that's very personal to me. I think pressure is trying to kick somebody and win on a world stage and not get kicked. But that's very unique to my experience. And I imagine being a CEO and, like, if I make enough bad decisions, I will tank this company and thousands of people lose their jobs. Or if I make enough right decisions, I will not only secure the jobs of these people, but I will take this entity of a corporation to the next level. Right. So I'd love for you to speak to pressure, and also for you to point to perhaps the next challenge that you've seen in your work that people don't really know about or talk about.
Yeah. And so, you know, I'm a mathematician at heart. So I'm always looking for equations. I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for things. And, you know, the equation I love from the super coach world that, you know,
that you and I both come from. Yeah.
That we come from is, and this one struck me, and it's anchors a lot of what I look at, and what I look at with clients is that we really do have unlimited potential. You know, when we look at the fact that, you know, life, relationships, business is an energy game. I mean, anybody watching this who has kids or has seen a kid knows that when their energy is greater than ours, and their determination is greater than ours, they're going to win. And so we really are energy in physical form in various ways. And so we have unlimited potential. But what gets in the way of our performance is interference, right? Is noise, so we have unlimited potential minus interference, or what gets in the way, equals our performance.
Correct.
In whatever realm we're in. Now, the biggest interference, and I used to say, the majority of interference, but you and I know it really is 99%, if not 100% of interference is generated in our thinking.
Yes, sir.
And so a lot of the folks that I work with are so redline when I first start talking to them. You know, it's difficult to get on their calendar. It's the meeting, the initial discovery session might
Yeah.
bounce a couple.
So I'd love to, so just for reference points, I don't know what red line means. So I'm imagining other people might
Yeah,
not know what that means. So I'd love for you to just explain that term before you go forward.
sure. And redline means they're revving
Ah,
so high
like a car,
that they're
right?
at
Like
their
the
red
car,
line.
like,
It's like
okay,
a car, race car. So
understand.
they're these they've conditioned themselves to take on more and more stress, to take
Mm,
on more and more. So they're conditioned to actually, you know, they've been trained that stress actually gets them to perform, that, you know, that every minute of every day they've got, you know, so much going on that they're so up against it in their
yeah,
calendar, right? They're so redlined, they're so on all the time that the biggest thing they don't realize, and I have to remind myself daily, is that stress and pressure is not what cooks us and pressurizes us and sort of catalyzes us to the next level.
mm,
It's actually the biggest source of interference is all of the thinking that they have around showing up and being prepared and saying the perfect thing and operating in the perfect way and making, you know, unbelievable decisions. And right, so they live in a world, they swim in a world of stress and pressure, and it affects their performance, and that's what they don't see. So my first job, our first job,
mm,
is to get them in a situation where they can actually unplug, where they can actually detoxify from their very busy mind of 70,000 thoughts a day. And that's
yeah,
the first thing, is once they see their own thinking
mm,
and notice that the only thing that's stressing and pressurizing themselves is their expectations for their own performance or how they show up, or and so that's groundbreaking for people that have trained themselves to just operate under a load, right? Operate
mm.
under stress.
I I completely resonate with you entirely. I remember as a professional athlete, my Taekwondo performance got better when I learned to relax, when I actually learned to enjoy the game. When I was, because before I would just always lose because I would break under pressure. Like I would be winning and freak out, and I would lose, and people
Mm,
would be like,
mhm.
"You're like idiot." And the moment I was like, "Man, like I just want to enjoy this game and like I just want to have fun." The moment I did that, I started winning, and I like like went to Mexico. I got a silver medal, like won a bronze medal, 10 National Olympics, and I'm like,
Nice.
it was almost I felt guilty because it felt like I was trying I wasn't putting in as much effort, but I was
Hmm.
performing way better. And that took
Yes.
me until I got to Super Coach Academy, where I really understood how that worked. But actually, to point to what you're saying, I spoke to a CEO today, and I kind of
Mm.
described to him a little bit what I did and about pressure. And like without, he kind of cut me off too, and he said, "Oh yeah, well, pressure is good. Sometimes it makes people focus." And I was like, "Huh, that's really interesting. That's such a normal premise." Because to me and you, that's like the thing in the way, but the premise is that pressure is good for you. It builds character, it makes you
Yes.
perform better.
Strength, and you know, and
Yeah.
and yes, when I'm in the gym,
Mm,
I want to operate under load, because what it's going to do is, right, is going to give me the strength and resilience physically. So
yeah.
yes, in a lot of realms, but then in the gym, there's, we overtraining, overexertion, right? We've got not enough time between sessions in the gym. My wife is an ex professional athlete. She's a basketball player, and uh, phenomenal. And when she was at her prime, she was working out twice a day.
Yeah.
And now she's paying for it. She's in her, she'll, She's in her late 40s, no cartilage in her knees, has had shoulder surgery, right? We see all this evidence physically. And to your earlier conversation, it's really easy to see that in athletes, the physical manifestations of overtraining, overload, right? Doing unsafe things physically, but it's more difficult to see when we've got a corporate athlete, right? What is the load that they've taken, the stress and pressure they've taken mentally and emotionally. And, you know, the spiritual realm is something that I didn't bring into the corporate world, right? It's because people confuse, you know, the heart and the soul and the mind and the way they all work together. That, right, they confuse that with, we talk spirituality or being in spirit, being inspired, insight, sights from within. We talk about all this stuff but it's, you know, when we talk spirit, people confuse it with, oh, you're talking religion, but we have a spiritual body. And most of the people that I work with sort of do that on the weekends, or they're going to do it once they, you know, retire, then they're going to explore that realm. And so it's they can be mentally at their best, emotionally at their best, they can sort of be physically at their best, but, you know, if they're not taking care of the whole system, that pressure, that stress is going to come and bite them in the backside. And so there's burnout, there's, you know, and all of the things that we can see physically in an athlete, we can't see so much when someone's operating. But when, you know, when I start talking with them, they start having conversations that they can't have anywhere else. It's just not appropriate for them to have it at work. And it's not appropriate for them to, you know, go home and have conversations, you know, at home that would end up concerning their family.
So I just had a really great thought, and that this insight came from you sharing. When we see athletes perform at their best and they score the goal, they do the winning kick, they win at the last second, they're standing on the podium with the gold medal, you can't help but get a little bit religious. You can't help but get a little spiritual in that moment. It's like when we watch human beings perform and push the limits of what's physically possible, like Usain Bolt running or jumping or things. Stadiums are filled with people because we're experiencing the spirituality of what's happening in the moment. And that's really obvious to everybody, right? And the same thing is happening for professional corporate athletes, but they don't have the same light on them. And so I think that's another thing too, that like you are performing as harder, if not as hard as Olympic trained athletes in corporate world, but you don't have a million fans cheering you on. You have people criticizing your every decision. Can you imagine? It's hard enough to make a decision, but every decision you make is going to be in the newspapers tomorrow and criticized by a million people you don't know. Like, that's got to be tricky. And I'd love for you to speak to that, because what I see might be a challenge is like, okay, I want to tap into my spirituality. I want to be more okay. But every decision I make, someone's going to talk shit about me, or I'm so, maybe you can help me, like the word in English where underappreciated, you know what I mean? Even though, because I'm the CEO, I'm supposed to give appreciation, but, you know, I need some love too. And, you know, because when other people score a touchdown, professional athletes, they have 20,000 people cheering for their name. Does that land? I'd love for you to go. I don't know where that went, but I'd love for you to go there with me.
No, I love it. I love what you're pointing to, because what is really interesting in sort of how this game works, and I'm talking large corporates,
Mm.
right? That's sort of my specialty, and where I've spent not only most of my time as a corporate athlete, you know, I'm a recovering corporate athlete myself. You know, the reason why I can breathe in these types of conversations and these types of rooms is I've run really large teams and you know, run businesses. And what happens is where a lot of these systems, you know, we call them the corporate pyramid, right?
Mm.
And so the higher you get,
Mm.
what's interesting is, you know, when you start getting at the director level or the VP level, the vice president level, you start climbing up in organizations. You have a lot of sponsorship and a lot of support. You have people above you that sort of have their eye on you. You're in their succession plans. You're
Mm.
sort of next in line. You're, you know,
Mm.
this move and then the next move. It's already mapped out. And so you've got people who you've made an impression on that are looking out for you.
Mm.
But the higher you get, all of a sudden, when you get and you're running a business unit, or you're the president of a division, or you're, you know, in the C-suite, all of a sudden, your peers are now your competitors.
Oh.
And you don't have the sponsorship anymore because you are at the top. So you're a bigger target internally. You don't have a lot of sponsorship. And the conversations you used to have with your peers where you would complain about the people you work for, you can no longer have. It's now a political risk to your future. So
Mm.
what happens when folks get to the corner office in the C-suite is they don't have the peers and friends that they used to have. They have to be careful having favorites or favoritism or going out after work and blowing off steam, right? Not a stack of sponsorship, and now they're a target. So a lot of them are deeply unfulfilled
Mm.
and feel guilty about it because this was supposed to be all of these things.
Yeah.
They're peerless and they don't have a stack of relationships that they can go to like you
Yeah.
and I can, right? We can
Mm.
grab a phone call and say, Nikon, this is going on. What do you see? What do you wonder about? They
Yeah.
don't have those relationships. And so it's not only that they're in the spotlight and under pressure, you know, the magnifying glass is on them. People either think all their ideas are crap and their decisions are crap, or they're unbelievable because that's what people around them think they've got to do. And so they're under the spotlight, but they don't ever get a break. And they
Mm.
don't ever, and so a lot of them are lonely, unfulfilled, in the middle of what is supposed to be the pinnacle of their careers. And
Yeah.
they're performing, they're doing, but it's coming at a cost, and they know it.
An invisible cost. I've sent my clients flowers just as like a pat in the back, and they like cried. They're like, "Oh my God, nobody sends me flowers." And I'm like,
Mm,
at first I thought it was weird, but then over time with working with this level of clients, because I've just started to work with that level, I get it. Because you're the one always looking out for people, like who's looking
yeah.
after you. And to make this real, because we've talked a lot about grounding and
Mm,
theory. I'd love for you to help me make this more real and perhaps share some case studies from your experiences, some before afters, or some like what's in your experience working with clients, what's a big challenge that was
yeah.
overcome through this kind of work, and we could look at that and see what we see, because I think that would be helpful in bringing what we're talking about and make it
Yes.
relatable.
Yeah. And so just a very pragmatic example.
Mm.
President of a well-known company here in the US that I've worked with for 4 years. And when I first started working with him, um, he had a sort of a black notebook and would track almost everything in every meeting, and would come with a sort of a prepared, and just the best operator I've ever met. Uh, And so we started to look at the difference between him being prepared and being ready to show up at his best.
Yeah.
Sort of the Neo and Morpheus in the holodeck in the
Yeah.
Matrix, right? Stop trying to hit me and just hit me. So
Oh,
we
that's
looked at
good.
how we could actually, instead of him preparing to show up at his best before every meeting and then debriefing with himself at the end of each meeting, who he was when he was at his best and how we could get him to actually show up at his best more often, and then deal with what was going on from that place. And so here we are 4 years later. I've worked with him, had the pleasure of working with him for 4 years. He said, you know, the biggest difference for me is I used to look at the clock, and if I had a 1 o'clock meeting at 12:45, I'd be like, okay, I've got to get prepared for this meeting. I have 15 minutes. I'll get prepared. And then he'd go into the meeting, and then after the meeting, he'd debrief. And he said, now I look at the clock at 12:45. I think I got 15 minutes before my next meeting. I'm going to go get myself a cup of coffee. I'm going to, play the piano. I'm going to walk around the block. Because he now knows that him showing up at his best isn't him preparing, it's actually showing up at his best. So he says, now it's 12:59. I get on my Zoom call, I get ready for my meeting, I do it, I show up, I deal with what shows up, I actually have some fun, some lightness, some space. People love it. And then at the end of the meeting at 2 o'clock, I, say to myself, that was a pretty cool meeting. What's next? And that alone has just transformed not only his performance, how he shows up, how much fun he's having, how much he enjoys the people around him, because he's just showing up and dealing with what shows up versus preparing every word that, could have, or every eventuality. And so his horsepower now is present, shows up at his best, and that has transformed his experience of his work as well as sort of the results of what he's doing. Hey, Nico, I can't hear you.
I'd love for you to speak
There you go.
to the results you saw, but before you do that, I want to reflect on that and then to share that everything you just said was the difference between me and Taekwondo when I sucked and when I didn't, and I started getting on the podium. And every athlete is going to understand what I'm about to say. If you're a professional athlete, you know who the best player is just in the warm-up room. And that guy or lady is usually the coolest cat in the room. And they're just like, they look like they're bored. They're like, all right, like, but I didn't understand, because before I was like, look at this loser. And when we got on the mat, I was like, holy shit, this person is a monster. What I didn't realize is how present they were to the moment. Everybody else was overthinking the thing, but they were so present. And from the outside, it looks like they're bored, but they're just present. And oftentimes there's not really a lot going on in the present, right? And yeah, and because when I used to prepare and warm up for fights, I would just do everything. I had this morning ritual and like visualization and all this bullshit. And I felt like it was like warming up was more work than the actual fight. And my mind was like, did I warm up right? Did I visualize? Did I do the right affirmations? And then when I stopped all that, when I dropped it, like, I'm just here to enjoy the game. Like I'm like nearing retirement. I'm just gonna enjoy this. I performed better in my early 30s in Taekwondo than I did in my early 20s.
Yes.
Because I was 1,000% more present, and the results spoke for themselves. So for me, the results in sports are obviously points on the board, medals, ranking. Yes. For you, I wonder what's that like for your clients? When you say results, what do you mean?
Yeah, and so, another example, I've been working with, I've actually been working with a lot of female clients lately, and the results that they're generating from a corporate perspective are spectacular. And one of my clients has just done absolutely amazing things, and she's one of the best corporate athletes I've ever worked with.
So when
but
you
to your point,
right,
yeah, she's not enjoying the game. Her enjoyment of the experience, because we don't understand where experience comes from. We think we're experiencing reality, when in reality we're experiencing our thinking. And you and I know that we're sort of stirring ourselves up,
yeah,
and the secondhand smoke of our own thinking is what's impacting our experience. And so when people see that they're so much bigger than not only their circumstance, at any moment they can generate the experience they're looking for, that's the piece. Because it's not just the results we're generating, but the experience we're having moment to moment in our life, that is what we're after. And so these athletes, these corporate leaders, are spectacular at generating results. What they're not spectacular at is realizing they're generating their own experience as well. It has nothing to do with the circumstances. And once they start enjoying the game, the pressure comes off, they show up at their best more moment to moment. They have this incredible experience, and then it doesn't matter so much whether stuff's going their way at every moment, or that's just part of the game.
Yeah. So as you were speaking, I realized, while I understand the word results, to me, like in professional sports, it's points, it's medals, it's rankings. When you say results, I feel I don't have perhaps context to understand what that looks like exactly. So I would like for you to expand on that. So when you say your clients create spectacular results, what does that mean, or what does that look like?
Well, that's one of the first places we look, because by all measures in the corporate world, corporate systems, they're generating the results, right? But they're not necessarily having a great experience doing so. They're under pressure, they're under stress, they're working all the time. They're, as we said, redlined. The result they're not able to generate is, once they know that they are creators of their moment-to-moment experience, then they have all of those results, plus they're enjoying the game, they're enjoying the people they're with, they're enjoying their families, they're enjoying their off time, they're enjoying not only all the fruits of generating the medals and the wins and the scoreboard, but they're actually enjoying the game. And I think that's, once people realize at any moment they can enjoy their life and their experience, it just opens up a whole different future that they haven't seen before. And it doesn't matter so much where they are and what they're doing. And
so
it's the love of the game, like you've described.
Well, I saw something really interesting as you were speaking, and the vision that occurred to me was, you have LeBron James as your CEOs, figuratively speaking, as your CEO. Real life LeBron James has a multi-million-dollar team designed to help him be at his best, so he can play better basketball and and create better results in the game for the team, right? So going back to your earlier analogy, if you have these high performance corporate athletes performing like redlining all the time, at some point something's going to break. At some point something's got to give. And from a company's perspective, if you're redlining your best player all the time, and you're putting this best player who's putting up the best results at such a major cost, which nobody can see, by the way, right? Because professional athletes, when they're going too hard, they sprain an ankle, they break something. But what I see from you were talking about, I was like, wow, I didn't see that the results people are putting on the board before they talk to people like you and me comes at such a high cost
Yes.
that eventually is going to break something internally. And then things are going to go downhill real quick. So what I'm reflecting from you is not only are they going to produce better results, which to me, I imagine is better revenues, better engagement, your stock rating goes up, whatever, but it's almost like at a much, much higher level of efficiency. So instead of needing to redline this thing to create XYZ, you're sitting the car at a comfortable cruising speed, which is much more sustainable. So
Yes.
this is cool. This is cool. So from your corporate, high performance corporate athlete, which might burn out in 6 months, you're going to get much more playing time out of them and they're going to enjoy it.
Yes.
Even better. So I'd love for you to kind of like take this somewhere, because that like when that made sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I love the analogy. You know, I look at what it's like in a car when you're stuck in second gear. You know, there used to be this guy in Seattle that used to drive around our neighborhood in a Ferrari, and it was clear he only knew how to get into second gear. And so he'd drive around the neighborhood with the engine whining, and you know, Ferraris sound amazing, but they're not designed to sit in second gear the whole time.
Ooh, that's
and
good.
So just the ability to find third gear, to find cruise gear, to find, you know, fourth gear, fifth gear, sixth gear, to find some gearing rather than being stuck in second gear or sitting there with the clutch, you know, pushed in. And so I love the analogy that what we do as coaches, you know, what you do, what I do is help people find their gears. So they're not always, you know, stuck in a gear. It's like, and what happens is, what's wild is seeing a client, right? What's beautiful about these corporate athletes is they start seeing that by doing two or three things just a little bit differently, they get a 10% lift in their effectiveness or a 15% lift in their effectiveness. We don't have to go back and keep showing them the gears. They find it themselves, and their performance goes through the roof, and they're actually spending less time doing it. And so then in less and less time, with less and less stress and pressure, when they find out that in fifth gear, sixth gear, when they're cruising at highway speed, they can do it in less time with less effort, they can use that time to bring cool stuff into the world, or the next thing, or the next company, or they can do cool stuff at home, or they can generate friendships. And you know, it just, their whole life opens up because they can generate better outcomes, better results, have a great experience doing it, and actually do it with much less of the usual effort and grind that they're used to. And then a whole world opens up for them where work is just part of their expression. But then they can use the extra energy, the extra oomph, the extra horsepower to, you know, I've got one client right now that's just decided he's going to get his pilot's license. And so because he's not 80 hours a week, he's actually taking his pilot's license. And it's opening up his world in a way that he hasn't seen before. And so there's all examples of that. I've got another client, she just bought a second home in Florida, and she's spending more time there and relaxing, and you know, her results are going through the roof. And so that's what we do, is have people find their gearing. I love that analogy.
I'm totally stealing that. So that's great. How do we hire you, Ian? Like, I'm sold, you know. I have an example I think would be valid. I had a client, and she was running a property property agency where she was buying and selling homes and condos in Thailand, and she was pretty successful. I'd say she's um, low to mid six figures in Thailand, which is huge, by the way. And because of COVID hit, so everything went on sale. She made a ton of money, and then when all the sales finished, her business were like grind to a halt, and she was like, "Oh shit." And she was so stressed because she was so hyper focused on trying to push the sales up because her well-being was tied to the performance of the company. And everybody does it. And then, so when I came into the picture, because she hired me, and we just spoke about everything you spoke about seeing that her well-being was being tied to performance, and tapping into something deeper than her own grunt and grind and hustle. And what occurred, she said, you know what, I'm done with KPIs. We don't do KPIs in this company anymore. And she had a small team, so she could do that. And then she said, you know what, I'm just going to give myself a break and just go with the flow and see what happens. 6 months later, she's looking to 10x her business. And this is how it happened. Because she wasn't so focused on pushing, her peripherals expanded, and all of a sudden she saw all the opportunity that were right in front of her. And because she had built these connections with property developers, they began to ask her to consult for new property development. So like, hey, we'll fly you out here, put you in a hotel. Can you tell us what would sell and what wouldn't? And she was like, okay. So now she's the primary sales consultant for all these major project developments. And because she has a sales company, she's the primary sales agents for them. So she's going from low to mid six figures to a couple $1 million within 6 months.
That's fabulous.
Because well done. Thank you. Because they got goosebumps. And that happened because she found the third, fourth, and fifth and sixth gear, right? Yes. And I don't need to be there all the time. I just need to say, like, have you seen the gears over there? It's right over there. And that's the beauty of our work, is we're pointing to people's hidden variables and hidden potentials, which allows results like those to occur. Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly it. Right. When people are spooling up their thinking and these scenarios that we build about what stuff's going to look like, and how, I don't know about you, but most of my scenarios
I do that too.
Catastrophic.
I'm a bum. Right? I'm a bum at like working at or not a bum. That's either working at McDonald's, KFC, or I live in a cardboard box on a corner.
Yeah, and my family is living under a bridge within a week in most of my thinking. Yeah, like it unwinds that quickly.
Yeah.
Me too. Right. So we all have those crazy thoughts. If I'm stuck in those, like they're real and they're spooling up all over the place, what I'm not in is fifth gear at highway speed, noticing the other cars around me, noticing where the traffic's going. And so there are so many benefits to the work that we do. But what I love is that, as you say, we're just pointing to it. Once they see it, they can take it from there.
I had this thing where I work with a lot of female clients too, and when they come to me and they're in that thinking and caught up and like, I'm living under a bridge, I'm not successful, and I'm like, do you know who you are? And then they're like, no. So I send them a picture of like a lioness on the hunt, like that's who you are, not in a pump up way, but like, no, really, this lioness on the hunt is it's a representation of your fifth, sixth gears.
Yes.
And they're like, oh yeah. So
a lot of our work is actually that, reminding people of who they are and loving on them to the point where they can love on themselves. Right. And there's a lot to love on.
I'm going to share with you my most favorite love quote that came from a friend, 𝗔𝗯cie 𝗂𝗰𝗲𝗃, and she's a celebrity in Thailand, and she's an amazing coach too. She sent me this thing, and it was like, I didn't come here to teach you. I came here to love you. Love will teach you. I was like, oh, stealing that too. So I want to respect your time. So I'd love for you to share, for the leaders and high performance corporate athletes who are listening to this, where can they get in touch with you? Where can they engage in you with your work and your artistry? Please let us know.
Yeah, no, thank you. Take a look at Becauz.com, which is
Links in the description.
Becauz or Z if you're outside of the US. Becauz.com. Take a squint. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
And lastly, if you were to give a gift to high performance corporate athletes who are listening that would help them to tap into those higher levels of performance and seeing the gears, what would you give?
What's been super helpful for me and to remind is I look at what extreme care looks like, right? Extreme care of ourselves, because most people are trained and designed to sort of be themselves out. They don't look behind them at what powers them. So right, look at extreme care mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Right, it's like Tony Stark, the sort of nuclear reactor that powers everything. Extreme care of that. We've got one shot at this, one life to live. Make sure you're taking extreme care of yourself.
I love that. I'm getting t-shirts made. Thank you so much for your time. This jam session with you has truly been extraordinary. Appreciated. I'd give you a hug if I could. And I definitely want to invite you back on the show or in as a guest mentor to my up and coming masterminds. And
love it.
You are such a breath of fresh air. And thank you so much for bringing light to the high performance corporate athlete. Your work is so valued. And to anybody watching this, and if you're a high performance corporate athlete, you need to talk to Ian.
Nicon, thank you. Just you're one of the most generous human beings I know, and so it's always a pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you. All right, I'll see you later, Ian. Bye.